Well, hello. I'd like to welcome you to this little study. And so it is that I'm glad that you're joining us. For those of you that are joining us, I guess the only way you can do that is some kind of media. But we're glad you did. And so I wanted to look at something tonight that's kind of unique. It's more of a warning, really, than something that we're going to look at and investigate and see where we're at. Because if you have a Bible, it's going to help if you use it. Turn to Mark chapter 8, and we're going to start there we'll just start with verse 34. And so while you're turning there, I wanted to kind of give you what we're going to talk about is something that in light of Jesus' mission on earth, Jesus warned those who would follow him. There's a couple of warnings he issued out. And so it is that I like to look at those. And I like to call this your cross. Your cross is plural. And so we wanted to look at a couple of things and see where we're at with that. Many of us have had cars that's had the check engine light come on. And when you see that little check engine light come on, you think, oh goodness, what's that? And so it is that's what this is tonight. It's your spiritual check wellness light. It's hopefully not on. But if it is, you might not know it's lit. And we'll look into some of those things. I have to do this to keep my grandpa's license in my pocket. I have to shout out to my grandchildren. So I'm going to say hi to Raya. I'm going to say hi to Avon. I'm going to say hi to Maya and hi to Sophie. So hope y'all are watching. At any rate, Mark chapter 8. Let's look at that. Your cross. Mark chapter 8 talks about a particular cross. And it says there, and when he had called the people unto him with his disciples also, he said unto them, whosoever will come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. That's one example. And then we have another one. We have a cross that in Luke chapter 14, verse 27, it says, and whosoever does not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. So there's a couple of crosses there we want to look at tonight. We're going to see where we stand with that. However, there's a warning. There's a big warning that comes with this, and we want to look at that. So let's just kind of break this down and unpackage this and see what kind of information Jesus would have us to engage our lives in as we go about him, following him with a cross. It says there, let him deny himself and take up his cross. Now, it's bad enough for his disciples to hear that Jesus is going to suffer, be rejected, and die on a cross. Now Jesus told them that they had to do the same thing. They have to do the exact same thing. He says there, deny yourself and take up your cross. And so it is, everybody knew what Jesus meant when he said this. Everyone knew that the cross was an unrelenting instrument of death. The cross had no other purpose but to kill people. And that's all it was. The cross was not a religious ceremony. It's not about traditions or spiritual feelings. The cross was a way to execute people, and that's it. And we kind of sanitized that in the 20th century. We initialized it as the cross as something that we wear and we use. But Jesus said, if Jesus told you, rather, I want you to walk down death row daily with me, take up your cross and follow me. That's a one-way journey. You're not coming back. And so today we might say, follow me into the electric chair. And so it is that's where we would be considering that type of instrument of death. Now, let's get something kind of straight, if we will. Cross-bearing does not refer to some irritation in life. I've heard people say, well, that's just the way I have to deal with life. That's my cross. That's something I have to bear. But it's more important to note this. It involves rather the way of the cross. It's kind of a picture of a man already condemned, if you will, and he's required to carry his cross on his way or place to execution like Jesus was required to do. It's that way. And we'll look into that. Now, Jesus makes denying himself equal with taking up his cross. The two express the same idea. The cross wasn't about self-promotion or affirmation. But the person carrying the cross knew that they could not save themselves. It's something they had to bear themselves. And one thing we want to note also, denying self is not the same as self-denial. And you think, wow, what does that really mean? Well, we practice self-denial when, for a good purpose, we occasionally give up the things that we need to. Like, I'm going to need to go on a diet, so I'm going to give up some things. But when we deny self, we surrender ourselves to Christ and determined to obey his will. So it's a surrender we got to do. Now, denying self means we want to live as an other person centered in us. Jesus was the only person to do it perfectly, of course, but we're to follow his steps. When he said, and follow me, that's kind of what that means. The following of Jesus is very simple. He carried a cross, and he walked down death's row, and he asks us to do the same thing. So the big question mark now is, why? Why is Jesus going to ask me to do that? Well, let's go back to the script and read. Let's pick up in verse 9, Mark 35. Let's pick up with verse 9. It says, for whoever desires to save his life will lose it, but whosoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel will save it. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and lose his own soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? For whosoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him the Son of Man will also be ashamed when he comes in glory of his Father with his holy angels. So let's break that out and see what's going on here. Whosoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. We must follow Jesus in this way because it's the only way we'll ever find life. It sounds strange to say that, doesn't it? You will never live life until you walk down death's row with Jesus. But that's the idea. You can't gain resurrection life without first dying first. Anyone that's planted a seed can sometimes see that seed as it dies, and sometimes it'll be attached to the plant as it comes up. Kind of the way it intends to be. That's the life. You have to die that death before you can have the other one that's promised. But it says also, what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? According to the walk down death's road, Jesus meant that we may gain the whole world and end up losing everything. That's a warning, and we need to note that with our spiritual check engine light that's on. Jesus himself had that opportunity. Remember when the devil tried to tell him, you can gain this whole world. If you'll just fall down and worship me, I'll give this to you. But he found life and victory in a death. And he didn't do it because he just had his cross to bear. And so it is that he also says, for whosoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him the Son of Man will also be ashamed. So it's not easy to go down death row with Jesus. You're going to have some complications. People are going to be upset with you. And that means we have to associate ourselves with people and someone who desire to be executed. That's what we have to do. We're with someone that's fixing to be executed, then that's us. And yet, so if we're ashamed of him that's been executed already, he's going to be ashamed of us. So we're going to have to watch what this really means. And so there's a note here that we have to just throw down now before we ever go any further. And that's simply, don't pick up your cross and try to follow Jesus unless you first deny yourself. Just don't attempt it. Because it's only going to come a stumbling block. Something that will trip you. It's going to trip others. So sometimes you might feel the need to hide the cross or cover part of it up or leave home without it or only produce it when it feels right. That's what's going to happen if you first do not deny yourself. There won't be room for that cross. So that's something we need to know. That's a warning. Deny yourself. It says in 1 Corinthians 1:23, but we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and a foolishness to Gentiles. Also in Romans 14:13, make up your mind not to put any stumbling block or obstacles in the way of a brother or sister, and that includes you. So, first thing, deny yourself. Second thing, pick up your cross. So, when you take up your cross, you must deal with the cross as it is, what it's for, and who it's for. What do you do when you're tempted? What are you going to do when others mock you? What are you going to say when someone finds out you're somewhere you should not have been? Or you know to do good and you don't do it. We lay down our cross when we do that, and we replace it with this in 1 John 2:16. For everything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, comes not from the Father, but from the world. The world and its desires pass away, but whosoever does the will of God lives forever. Our actions are viewed through others. Sometimes they're viewed to be against us. That's what's causing the stumbling block. Our cross wasn't with us when we needed to produce it. So what does it really mean to take up your cross? Daily. Jesus said to his disciples, you have to take up your cross daily. Well, how can you do that? Well, first, it's there to remind you of what you have just done. I'm dying to self. And he says, take up your cross daily. And he put that as a condition of discipleship. So there's a warning here we need to look at. Are you a disciple of Jesus Christ? And you answer that yes. Then you had better deny yourself and you better have a cross. But what does that really mean? He says in Luke 9:23, if anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me. So what does this mean when Jesus says you could take up your cross? Well, first of all, you have to know where it is. Where'd you leave it? I can just see me coming down the stairs in the morning and asking my little wife, Brenda, where'd I leave my cross? I had it yesterday, but I don't know where I left it. I must have left it at work, or did I leave it in the car? Did I leave it in the bathroom? Is it in the living room? Where is my cross? So to take up your cross is something that has to take place in your thoughts. It's not a little trinket you can wear, even though that might help. But when thoughts that aren't pleasing to God come to your mind, you have to put them to death on the inner cross. And that's what it is. It's really the way of the cross. It's not something tangible. It's just a way. And so when you're looking at others and you're kind of saying, oh, I don't know why they're doing that, or I do know why they're doing that. They're only doing that for this or that. And we're looking solely at them as viewed through our eyes. Sometimes without a cross there, that becomes a real temptation. It pops in your mind. Satan gets it in there, and then you deal with it. And so what that really means is you don't permit the thought process to pass through your mind to come to your heart. That cross has to be there to stop it. And so that's what we're looking at today. Where are you at with that? Well, and then it says follow Jesus. What are we going to do with that? Well, first of all, how do you follow someone? If I were to ask you to follow me to Denny's, and you say, well, I don't know the way, and I say, well, just follow me. Well, just a couple things naturally has to happen. You have to stay close. You have to, be in sight. And if I make a turn to the left, you have to turn to the left, and so on and on. But what did Jesus do in his daily life to make you want to follow? That he's asking you to follow? Well, he had a firm resolve to do when he was tempted to say, not my will, but my Father's will be done. Luke 22:42. Luke 22:42. He took his cross and denied himself. His temptations never resulted in sin, in word, thought, or deed. He always had another will to do. He had a cross, and he used it. But it's also written of Jesus in Hebrews 5:7 that he offered up prayers with supplications and cries and tears to him who was able to save us from death. That's what it takes, a faithful prayer every morning. God, get me out of this. God, give me the strength to carry this cross, but not my will, but yours be done. And it leads to transformation. Being transformed by the newness of your mind. That's daily. That's something that has to happen. Not just once, not just in the morning, not just when you became a Christian, or not when you renewed your vow, so to speak. But that transformation is something that's ongoing. It's changing it's producing a different person. That's what that was about. So let's talk just a minute about bearing your cross. Your cross is going to come in many different weights, styles, and different appearances. Luke 14:27 says, "And whoever does not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple." The NIV puts it this way, "And whosoever does not carry their cross and follow cannot be my disciple." And so it is, disciples must count themselves as dead already. They must go all the way. It's not just a short trip, but it's all the way. And it starts out there and says, "And whosoever." We remember that Jesus spoke to this greater multitudes, making them what he meant, but to be a disciple or to follow after him. And this probably horrified his listeners. I can just see that happening. As Jesus spoke these words, everybody knew what he meant. In the Roman world, before a man died on a cross, he had to carry part of it to where he was going to be executed, the beam or the horizontal part, one of the two. So when Romans crucified a criminal, they just didn't hang them on the cross. They hung the cross on them to go be executed. And that's kind of what we're talking about right now. That cross is there. And carrying the cross always led to death. It always did. No one carried a cross for fun. The first hearers of Jesus didn't need an explanation of what was fixing to happen. They knew that it was the instrument of death and torture and humiliation. If someone took up a cross, they never came back. Like I said, it's a one-way trip. But let's focus a little bit on the words, his cross. Jesus chose this phrase. He did not say the cross. He did not say a cross. The idea is that there's a cross suited to each individual. And one person's experience on the cross may not look like another person's experience on the cross. That's why Jesus says, do not compare yourselves by yourselves, because you just don't know. The general idea is, of course, that Jesus is, about hearing the cross reference, is the different types of afflictions. And sometimes we get that confused. We say, yeah, I've got pain, sickness, and grief that comes in a man's life. And that may be part of it. But that's not the cross we're looking at. That's not the way of the cross we're looking at tonight. Only a person who, for the sake of his service, surrenders all the self-seeking and abandons all the strivings of his own interests can be his disciple. You got to just have that type of attitude. But a warning. You cannot be my disciple. Jesus made it clear that only cross bearers can be his disciples. We sometimes underestimate the demands of Jesus when we present the gospel. We give them the impression sometimes that coming to Jesus is only to believe some facts. I believe Jesus Christ is the Son of God. Yes, that's a fact. You have to do that. Instead of a life that must be yielded to Jesus. We need to put that out there. That's what he means when he says, you cannot be my disciple. I want you to know the facts, but I want your life, and I want it yielded to me. So, he also says that whoever does not bear his cross cannot come after me and be my disciple. And whosoever kind of means everybody. So here's a question. What did Jesus mean when he said, take up your cross and follow me? Let's just kind of look into that. Let's first of all say, what does it mean? What does not mean? Many people interpret the cross as some burden, like we said, a thankless job, a physical illness. And they say with self-pity and pride, that's my cross I must have to carry. But such an interpretation is not what Jesus meant when he said, take up your cross and follow me. So therefore, take up your cross and follow me means be willing to die in order to follow Jesus. That is dying to self. That has to happen. We've already stated that. It's an absolute surrender. You raise up both hands and you wave a white flag. Jesus, I'm out of here. I'm denying myself. In Luke In Luke 9:57, there's three people there that came to Jesus and said, hey, I want to be your disciple. The first one, he said, Jesus said, rather, the foxes have holes and they don't, I don't even have a place to sleep. And that guy walked away. Another one said, well, if somebody has died, I got to go back and bury him. Nope, you got to come with me right now. You need your cross and you need it now. The other one said, well, I got to go tell everybody bye, then I'll be right back. Nope, I need you now. So none of those were willing to take up their cross and crucify him with their own interest in heart. They had those other interests. They were not ready. They did give it up for some reason or another. So what does that mean? One must follow Jesus. Well, what does that really mean? Where are you at with that? How are you doing that? Jesus led the way. To become a Christian is to let Jesus be your Lord and mentor. There's no other person that can be there, and that includes you. You got to get that out of there. So when you follow Jesus, you have to know that from the very beginning. It's just one of the things that has to happen. And so tonight, I wanted to look at a situation that's in the Bible, and we're going to look at that situation. We're going to explain it, and then we're going to look at the information we receive from picking up your cross, denying yourself, and following Jesus, and see if we can't come out with a different outcome. So let's look at a story. If you have a Bible, turn to Luke chapter 11, and we're going to start in verse 24. I'm going to paraphrase this to save a few minutes. But in Luke chapter 11, there's a story there, and I like to call this the unclean spirit returns. We're going to have somebody coming back. You can read that, but here's the gist of it. It says, first of all, that he goes out of a man. Number two, and then he's going through the dry places seeking rest. He finds none, this unclean spirit. And he also says, you know what? I'm going to return to, and note what he says here, I'm going to return to my house from which I came. So how would you like to have that? Some demon in the other world pointing to you and saying, that's my house. That's where I live. See that person right there? Yeah, I know they're in church or he's preaching right now or whatever, but that's my house. I live there. Anyway, he goes back and he finds it swept and it's put in order. And he takes with him 7 other spirits, and it says that they're more wicked than himself. They enter, and then it says they dwell. Nobody kicked them out. And it says the last day of that man was worse than the first. Let's kind of go back now and see if we can't fix this. Let's see if we can't make a different outcome of this altogether. So he goes out of a man, this evil spirit, the unclean spirit, goes out of a man. And that's when we become a Christian. Our life is cleaned and it's ready to go. We're completely innocent. God's forgiven us and we're ready. We're ready to follow Jesus. But this evil sin, all this evilness that was in us goes away, but it comes back. And it says, I'm going to return back and see what's happening there to my house. And so he goes in, he says, wow, this place is swept, it's cleaned out. I'm going to go get some friends. We're going to come back and we're going to occupy this place. I like it here. But he goes back with these 7 other friends, and here comes 8 people, and they come back into this house, and what's the first thing that happens? They try to enter in, and they hit the cross. And they just stops them. It startles them. Well, I can't get in. What's happened here? Well, I don't know. This wasn't here before. We can't get in. Well, let's come back tomorrow. So daily we pick up a cross, and the next day that cross is right back there. They come back and they slam right into that cross again. They can't get in. And they continue this and continue till finally one day they met that cross, but it's just a little bit off a center and they can't get in, but there's just enough room to look in. And so all 8 of them are pulling on the cross, trying to get it out of the way so they can get in, and all of a sudden it becomes deadly silent. And then screams of terror. Can you imagine what 8 screaming demons is going to sound like? Because when they looked in that cross, they're screaming to their loudest. Oh my, what's happened to us? Look, we get out of here. We have to go hide. Let's run. Let's go get under the rocks and hills and let the mountains fall on us. Let's just jump in these pigs and get out of here. Screaming in terror. Jesus Christ is on the other side of that cross. And they can't be there. It won't work. And the last state of that man enjoyed eternal life. So how do we put that in today's, when we say follow? Jesus said, follow me. Well, let's wrap that up like this. You ever followed someone? Sure you have. Let's just suppose we're doing that right now. Here's the highway patrol guy, and he's going to lead us to another town, to another place. And he says, I want you to follow me. So you start following. A little later, the highway patrol notices that somebody that was in the caravan is not there. So he tells everybody to set your crew zone. He's going to double back and find you. So he goes back and he sees you. You're off the road. You're on the side of the road. And you're there. And he pulls up to you and he says, what are you doing here? And you say, well, I got behind. I lost sight of where everybody was at. And I thought this was a shortcut. My GPS told me to take this area and go down this way. And I got down. Now there's something wrong with my vehicle and I can't go. He said, well, you've took the wrong exit. You shouldn't have done that. You're at the wrong exit. This is the way to the dump ground. And there's glass and there's nails and potholes and sharp objects and danger. There's gangs of people around here that thrive on unprotected people. And I see what's wrong with your vehicle. You've had a cross blowout. You've blown it out. You're going to have to put it back. Why don't you do that while I stand behind you and guard you from all these evil? And so we get the new cross on. The DPS guy comes up and says, okay, follow me. Stay close. He goes back and gets his car and he starts to leave. He stops again. He comes back and taps on your window and says, there's a couple of things I got to tell you. Number one, you need to stay close. Number two, you need to follow me no matter what. Because on the road ahead, it's going to be up and down hills. There's going to be left and right turns when you think I should have went straight. And I'm going to go straight when you think I should have turned left or right. And this road is under construction. There's going to be signs out there that's going to say detour, exit, and even people with flags waving and pointing you to get off of this road. Don't do it. You follow me. And I must warn you now, we're going to have to go through some water. I want you to drive through it with me. You follow me into it. We're going to come out the other side. There's a little bit of blood in that water. There's some bloodshed. It's going to get on you. But you have to keep coming. You have to keep following me. There's going to be some hecklers after that. They're going to tell you you're going the wrong way. They're going to laugh. They're going to make fun of you. And then later on, I can tell you for sure, you're going to get foggy. It's going to be dark. Your lights are going to go out. So right now, I'm going to turn on my lights. I want you to follow me. I'll go just as fast as you can keep up. I won't go any faster than what you can bear to follow. So follow me. That's what this is about. Follow Jesus. The light's on. In a minute, we're going to sing a song. It's called The Way of the Cross. And so what I'd like you to do now is just kind of look at your life and say, have I denied myself? You can't be a disciple of Jesus if you haven't. Am I following Jesus daily with a cross? You have to pick it up and you have to bear it and you have to display it. And so that's what Jesus is saying to us all. So think about that while we sing this song. Let's go home.